He thought he could get away with it. In a crowded Colorado diner, a violent thug slapped a 78-year-old man to the floor, laughing, as the room froze in fear. What he didn't know was that the old man's son, Jack Hale, had just returned from years of living in isolation. And Jack wasn't just any son. He was a former Navy SEAL trained to hunt danger with cold precision, accompanied by his loyal German Shepherd Ranger. Within minutes, the entire town would realize they had provoked the wrong family. If this story touches you, please help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. Your click really means more than you think. God bless you for keeping hope alive. Winter pressed gently over Pine Valley, spreading a thin veil of frost across rooftops and the quiet mountain road that cut through town. The morning air carried the kind of crisp cold that seeped into bones, but awakened memories, especially those belonging to Harold Hale, a 78-year-old retired railroad worker whose posture had softened with age, but whose eyes still held the resilience of a man who had spent decades out in the open air. His back was slightly curved, his hands knotted with old calluses, and his thinning white hair peeked out beneath a wool cap. Despite the wrinkles lining his face, there remained something steady and dependable about him, the look of a man who had seen both hardship and good years, and who had accepted both with quiet dignity. After waking before sunrise, as he always did, Harold walked slowly through the town's main street toward Pine Valley Diner, a small restaurant with red vinyl stools, warm lighting, and the comforting aroma of bacon and pancakes drifting through the door seams. On most days, the diner was where he enjoyed a rare moment of warmth and small talk. But today felt different, an ache behind his ribs, a faint weight in his chest he couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was because he missed his son more than usual. Jack Hale, his only child, had disappeared into a life of self-imposed isolation deep in the woods after leaving the Navy SEALs. At 45, Jack carried the rugged tiredness of a man who had faced more ghosts than victories. He stood at Waintuoiatu, his lean frame hardened by years of training, but noticeably worn and thinner from the solitude he never spoke about. His face was sharp, with a jaw marked by stubborn stubble and cheeks shadowed by unshaven growth. His hair dark brown, slightly long, at the nape streaked with silver at the temples, fell around his face like a reminder of time slipping by. And his eyes, cold gray, heavy, always searching for something he never found. Jack's clothing never changed, an old dark brown leather jacket weathered with deep creases, a red and navy flannel shirt faded from winters, past worn-out jeans, brushed pale at the knees, thick cold-weather boots, and a gray knitted scarf coiled around his neck like armor. He rarely came to town. Too much noise. Too many memories he wasn't ready to face. Harold reached the diner. First, the bell above the door chiming softly. Emily Ross, the young waitress with short auburn hair pulled into a loose knot, greeted him with a warm smile. Emily stood in her mid-20s, petite, with bright, observant eyes that always seemed to catch things others overlooked. She had a gentle, responsible nature shaped perhaps by years caring for her younger siblings, and Harold had always been fond of her kindness. "Morning, Mr. Hale," she said. "Your usual seat." "If it's free," Harold replied with a small grin. Emily led him toward the window booth. Outside, a thin layer of frost clung to the glass framing the quiet street, where a young man set up a camera. Ethan Ward, a travel vlogger in his early 30s with blonde hair tucked under a knitted beanie, was adjusting a tripod. Clean-shaven, cheerful, and always chasing the next story, Ethan had an easy charm that contrasted sharply with the heaviness Pine Valley had been carrying these past months due to rising tensions around land ownership. Harold's cabin, peacefully settled by the lake and surrounded by tall pines, had drawn unwanted attention, especially from Richard Cole, a wealthy real estate developer with a meticulous suit and smile exterior that masked ruthlessness. When Harold turned down his offer to buy the land, Richard simply sent someone else. That someone arrived now. The diner door swung open with a heavy thud as Travis Boone walked in, a broad, thick-shouldered man in his late 30s, with oil-stained jeans, a brown jacket, and a face that looked carved from stone. His beard was uneven, his eyes small and mean, always scanning the room as if searching for someone weaker than him to pounce on. Travis worked unofficially for Richard Cole. Everyone in Pine Valley knew it. Everyone also knew better than to cross him. Emily's smile faded the moment she saw him. Travis spotted Harold almost immediately. His boots stomped heavily across the floor as he approached the old man's booth, his lips curling into a mocking grin. "Well, look who's sitting nice and comfortable," Travis drawled. "The man who thinks he's too good to sell a worthless patch of lake dirt." Harold felt the familiar tightness in his chest. He straightened himself as best he could. "I already told Mr. Cole I'm not selling my cabin. Then maybe you need some convincing." Travis leaned in, casting a shadow across the table. Emily froze behind the counter. The few customers fell silent. They feared Travis, everyone did. Harold's voice stayed calm but firm. "Leave me be, son." The word son made Travis's face flush with rage. "Don't talk to me like I'm some kid you can order around." Before Harold could react, Travis's hand shot out. The slap cracked through the diner like a whip. The old man stumbled sideways, crashing to the floor, his glasses skittering away. A gasp rippled through the room. Emily pressed record on her phone, hidden behind a coffee pot. Outside, Ethan's camera was already pointed toward the window. He captured everything with wide, horrified eyes. Travis stepped forward, as if ready to strike again. Then the diner door chimed. A cold wind rushed inside. A man walked in tall, broad-shouldered beneath a weathered leather jacket scarf, hanging loosely boots caked in frost. His hair brushed his collar, his jaw dark with days-old stubble, and his eyes storm gray, sharp enough to cut. Walking by his side was a German Shepherd Ranger. 5 years old, muscular alert coat, black and tan with pointed ears raised high. A disciplined, intelligent, military-trained dog whose stance alone commanded silence. Jack Hale had returned. He stopped the instant he saw his father on the floor. Ranger lowered into a defensive crouch, growling, deep and low eyes locked on Travis. The diner went silent. The air grew icy. No one knew what would happen next. And then the screen fades to black. A cold wind rolled over Pine Valley as the diner fell into a stunned, breathless silence, the frost-tipped air pushing through the doorway that Jack Hale had left open behind him. His gray eyes, sharp and stormy, locked first on his father, lying on the floor, and then on Travis Boone, who stood frozen mid-step, his bravado melting as Ranger's low warning growl filled the stillness. Jack moved with quiet, lethal control, dropping to one knee and helping his father sit upright. Harold Hale, pale beneath the fluorescent lights, forced a weak smile. "I'm all right, son," he muttered, though his trembling hands betrayed him. Jack's jaw tightened. He slid a steady hand behind Harold's back, supporting him carefully. Inside, Jack felt a familiar storm churn, a mixture of guilt, protectiveness, and a cold rage he had spent years trying to bury deep in the woods where no one could see him break. He had left the Navy SEALs to outrun the ghosts of his past, but now staring at his father's reddened cheek, he realized the ghosts had followed him home. Ranger shifted position, stepping between Travis and the rest of the diner. The 5-year-old German Shepherd lowered his head, hackles raised, eyes bright and intelligent. Trained for combat, Ranger understood the tension instantly. He stood as if waiting for Jack's silent command. The bell above the door jingled again, not from a new arrival, but from a man pushing roughly inside. Sheriff Wade Porter entered the diner. Porter was in his late 50s, tall, with a burly frame softened by years of comfort rather than discipline. His face was wide with deep creases around the mouth and narrow, dark eyes that always seemed to calculate rather than care. A thick mustache hid most of his upper lip, and the smell of stale tobacco clung to his brown uniform jacket. People used to say Wade Porter had once been a decent cop, but that was before Richard Cole, the powerful, well-dressed developer, bought up half the town, and the rest of Porter's integrity along with it. Porter raised his hands in a show of rehearsed calm. "All right now, folks, what's all this noise?" He glanced at Travis, whose chest puffed up slightly as if reassured by the sheriff's presence. Jack lifted his father gently onto a chair before turning to face Porter. Standing tall in his weathered leather jacket, scarf hanging loose boots planted firmly, Jack looked like a man who carried his own winter wherever he went. "What you're looking at," Jack said, voice low and cold as an assault. "My father was attacked. In public. With witnesses." Porter waved dismissively, adjusting his belt. "Misunderstanding, I'm sure." Emily Ross, still clutching her phone, stepped forward despite her shaking. "Sheriff? I have everything on video," she said. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were resolute. This was not the first time she'd seen Travis torment someone, but it was the first time she felt hope that someone might stop him. Travis glared at her. She shrank back. Porter ignored the statement entirely. "Travis didn't mean anything by it," the sheriff continued, shrugging. "Let's all calm down and go home." Jack's gray eyes hardened into steel. "No," he said. "We're filing a report. Now." Porter's smile faltered. "Son, you don't tell me how to run my town." Jack stepped forward just one step, but the shift in the room's energy was immediate. "That's my father," he said softly, "and I'm not your son." Porter's jaw tightened. Travis smirked, but before either could speak, Jack lifted his hand slightly toward Emily. "Send your video," he instructed. "Now." Emily blinked, then nodded. Her fingers moved quickly. Ethan Ward, the vlogger outside, rushed into the diner, breath visible in the cold air. "I recorded it too," he said, lifting his camera. "Every second." Porter paled. Jack retrieved his phone from his jacket. It wasn't a normal phone. Its black casing and encrypted interface gave away its military origin. He scrolled to a secure contact labeled only Callan, NCIS, and pressed. The line connected instantly. A gruff professional male voice answered. "Go for Callan." Jack's voice shifted into something colder, sharper his operational tone. "Callan. This is Jack Hale. I'm reporting a targeted assault on a military dependent. Local law enforcement compromised. Multiple civilian recordings secured." A pause. "Confirmed. Forward footage. Stand by for instructions." Jack sent the files with a single motion. When he returned the phone to his pocket, Porter looked furious and afraid. Travis looked confused. Harold looked proud. Jack turned to the sheriff. "This is now federal," he said. "You can't bury it." Porter's nostrils flared. "We'll see about that." But his voice lacked conviction. Jack placed a steadying hand on his father's shoulder. "Let's go home," he said softly. Harold nodded weakly, leaning into him. Ranger fell into step beside them, gaze never leaving Travis. The diner remained silent as Jack guided his father out. Once outside, the cold felt sharper, as if Pine Valley itself understood that the ground had shifted. Jack loaded Harold gently into his old truck and drove toward their cabin tucked deep in the woods by Winter Lake. By the time they arrived, evening shadows had taken over the snow-laced pines. Jack helped his father inside, settled him into a chair, then moved with quiet urgency. He locked the doors, closed the curtains, Ranger trotted the perimeter of the living room alert and focused ears twitching at every sound. Jack opened a small black case from beneath his bed. Motion sensors. Thermal scanner, portable jammer. Tools he had hoped he'd never need again. But the past had caught up. As he placed a sensor above the back door, his father spoke softly. "Jack, are we in danger?" Jack paused, stared at his own reflection in the dark window. "Not yet," he said. "But they're coming," Ranger growled suddenly, turning toward the woods. Jack grabbed the thermal monocular and peered outside. 2 faint heat signatures glowed through the trees. 2 SUVs' engines warm, parked where no one should be. Watching. Jack exhaled slowly. His eyes darkened. "It's starting," he whispered. Ranger stood at his side, muscles tensed. The calm before the inevitable storm settled heavily over the cabin. And Jack Hale knew without doubt those men had come for him. Snow settled softly over Pine Valley as evening shadows stretched long across the frozen ground, the cold air carrying a hushed stillness that made every sound feel heavier than it was. Inside the Hale cabin, dim lamplight flickered against the wooden walls, casting wavering shadows over Harold Hale, who sat quietly in his armchair. His breath was slow, steady, yet his hands trembled slightly with the weight of what had happened earlier that day. His thoughts kept drifting back to the slap that knocked him down in the diner, and the terrifying possibility that his son might be dragged back into danger he had spent years escaping. Jack Hale moved silently through the cabin, installing the last of the motion sensors along the back window. His tall frame, wrapped in the old dark brown leather jacket and gray scarf, shifted with controlled, deliberate motions. A hint of exhaustion clung to him, the kind that came from years of isolation more than physical strain. His gray eyes, usually guarded, scanned every corner as if expecting something to leap from the shadows. And then suddenly Harold's phone rang. An unknown number. Harold hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice, trembling, urgent, came through. "Mr. Hale, please, it's Evelyn Cole. I need to speak to you. Alone." Evelyn Cole. The wife of Richard Cole had always been known in town for her graceful posture and elegant composure. In her mid-50s, she had soft blonde hair styled neatly to her shoulders, pale blue eyes that seemed tired more often than not, and a fragile gentleness that contrasted sharply with the cold ambition of her husband. She was tall, slender, and always dressed in quiet tones. Creams, grays, soft browns, fitting for a woman who spent her life trying not to attract attention. But tonight, her voice held something Harold had never heard from her before fear. "Please meet me at St. Jude's," she whispered. I can't explain on the phone. It's important. I promise you're safe." Harold's gaze lifted to Jack, who was now watching him with narrowed eyes. Jack could read danger the way others read weather. "Who was that?" he asked, voice low. Harold swallowed. "Evelyn Cole. She wants to talk." Jack's expression hardened, about what Harold didn't know. But something in Evelyn's voice, something trembling and desperate, made him believe she meant no harm. The 2 men stared at each other, the seasoned father and the battle-hardened son, before Harold spoke again. "Jack, let me go, please. I've lived long enough to tell when someone's asking for help." Jack wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed to keep Harold close, to never let another threat get near him. But he also saw the stubbornness in his father's eyes, the same stubbornness Jack had inherited. Finally, he nodded once. "I'll follow. No one gets near you." 20 minutes later, the Hale truck rolled slowly down the snowy road. St. Jude's Chapel stood alone among a cluster of bare trees, its stone walls glowing faintly in the orange lamplight. Harold stepped out first, his breath swirling in the chill. Jack stayed in the truck's shadows. Ranger at his side, the dog's ears pricked forward with alert focus. Inside the chapel, candles flickered along the aisles, their scents of melted wax and old wood wrapping the place in a solemn quiet. Harold walked slowly to a front pew, where Evelyn Cole sat waiting. When she turned, he saw her face clearly pale, frightened, and streaked with the remnants of tears. She looked like someone who had been fighting a battle in silence for far too long. "Thank you for coming," Evelyn whispered. Her hands trembled as she clutched a small black USB drive, the metal glinting in the candlelight. Harold lowered himself into the pew behind her. "What's going on, Evelyn?" She took a shaky breath. "Pine Valley. It's been rotten from the inside for years." Her voice cracked. "Richard, the mayor, the sheriff, they've all been working together." As she spoke, Harold studied her carefully. Her posture was rigid with anxiety, her normally composed features strained. Her pale eyes darted nervously toward the chapel entrance, as if she feared someone would burst through at any moment. "Anyone who refuses to sell their land," she continued, "gets harassed or threatened. Or worse, broken fences, late-night pounding on doors, fake citations, accidental damage. Richard calls it leverage." She swallowed back a sob. "And Travis Boone, he's their enforcer. Richard sends him to scare people until they give up." Harold's heart sank. "Including me." "Yes," Evelyn whispered. She held out the USB with trembling fingers. "I've collected things. Documents, audio recordings, financial transfers, names of the people they've terrorized, even the plan to seize all the land around the lake." Harold's breath caught. "Why give this to me?" Evelyn's eyes glistened. "Because Jack won't be intimidated. They're terrified of him. And you're the only person in this town they won't dare touch again. Please, take it. End this." Harold took the USB, feeling its small weight like a stone in his palm. Outside, Jack watched through the chapel's frosted window. He could not hear the words, but he recognized the posture of confession and fear. Ranger sat beside him, pale, still eyes fixed on the pews. When Harold emerged from the chapel, Jack stepped from the shadows. His eyes flicked to the USB. "What's that proof?" Harold said simply. Back at the cabin, the two men sat close to the lamp's orange glow, while Ranger lay pressed against Jack's boot like a steadfast sentinel. Jack connected the USB to his encrypted laptop, and files bloomed across the screen, audio clips of Richard Cole exchanging bribes, spreadsheets of laundered money lists of targeted homeowners, and a detailed map showing which properties were next. Rage tightened Jack's chest, but beneath the fury pulsed something else: clarity. He knew what he had to do. He took out his secure phone again. "Callan," he said when the voice answered. "I need an FBI contact, now." As night deepened, the cabin fell into thick darkness. The lamplight went out. And then Ranger shot to his feet, muscles coiled, a deep growl vibrating through the room. Jack froze. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Approaching through the snow-packed trail outside. Jack reached for his survival knife, the steel glinting faintly in the shadows. His gray eyes sharpened, no longer haunted but ready. The soldier inside him was awake. And someone was coming. Dawn broke over Pine Valley with a pale, icy light that spilled across the snow-covered rooftops, like a ghostly tide, turning every branch, every rooftop, every distant ridge into a cold silhouette. The hush before sunrise felt different today, tight, expectant, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Inside the Hale cabin, Jack Hale stood at the kitchen table staring at the USB drive, lying in the lamplight like a loaded weapon. His tall frame, wrapped in his old, dark brown leather jacket, felt heavier than usual. The gray scarf around his neck, still cold from the earlier patrol, brushed lightly against his jaw as he exhaled. He hadn't slept. Neither had Ranger, the 5-year-old German shepherd, now lying stretched out at Jack's feet, ears pricked forward at every distant sound of cracking ice or shifting wind. Ranger's devotion radiated through every controlled breath, every subtle twitch of muscle an animal carved from focus and loyalty, forged in the same fire as Jack himself. When the sun finally edged over the tree line, a faint rumble reached the cabin engines, low and disciplined. Jack moved to the window, lifting a slat of the curtain. Down the snowy road, slipping through the morning haze, came 3 unmarked black SUVs, their matte surfaces reflecting nothing, their tires crunching purposefully through the frost. Behind them, a 4th vehicle followed, sleek, quiet, unmistakably government. Jack felt a strange mix of relief and tension drag through his chest. "They're here," he muttered. Ranger rose instantly. In town, the vehicles rolled to a stop outside the mayor's large colonial-style home. Byron Kemp, the mayor of Pine Valley, was a short, heavy-set man in his early 60s, with thinning gray hair combed obsessively across his scalp. His round face, normally smug with political confidence, looked deflated as federal agents dressed in dark tactical jackets marched toward his front door. Agent Mark Hanley, a broad-shouldered NCIS operative with sharp cheekbones, a trimmed beard, and a calm, highly disciplined demeanor, stepped forward and knocked once. When the door opened, a sleepy, pale-faced Kemp blinked at the badges presented to him. Moments later, the mayor of Pine Valley was led out in handcuffs, his robe fluttering uselessly in the cold dawn as neighbors peeked through curtains in horrified fascination. Meanwhile, another SUV slid to a halt in front of the Pine Valley Sheriff's office. Inside, Sheriff Wade Porter sat behind his desk, drinking stale coffee, his bulky stomach straining against his brown uniform shirt. His thick mustache twitched when he saw the federal agents walk straight in without knocking. He stood up abruptly. "What's the meaning?" His words cut off as 2 agents moved behind him, securing his arms before he could reach the phone on his desk. Porter's small dark eyes darted around the room, realizing too late that the web of protection he thought he had was nothing compared to federal authority. The agents read him his rights as they marched him outside. A crowd had already formed, whispering, pointing. Porter, who once strutted through Pine Valley like a king, now looked like a cornered animal, sweaty, stunned, and stripped of everything he thought untouchable. But the most dramatic arrest happened nearly 80 miles away, at a private airstrip near Denver. Richard Cole, impeccably dressed even in crisis, with his tailored navy coat, silver tie, and slicked-back dark hair streaked with gray, was sprinting toward a waiting jet. His handsome face, normally composed, twisted into panic as he shouted at a pilot to start the damn engines. Cole's ambition had always defined him. He was a man who treated entire towns as chess pieces, but for the first time he had miscalculated. Before he could climb the stairs, federal agents surrounded the aircraft. One agent called out, "Richard Cole." "Step away from the plane." Cole froze, chest heaving, his calculated confidence shattered. The realization washed over him slowly, painfully. He was not escaping this. Moments later, the man who had manipulated Pine Valley for years was handcuffed and escorted off the runway. Back in Pine Valley, word spread like wildfire. The arrests tore open wounds the town had carried for years. People gathered along sidewalks, whispering their own experiences, broken fences, strange nighttime visitors, threatening letters, mysterious fines. Stories that once filled them with fear now sparked something else: outrage, relief, and long-forgotten courage. Jack Hale watched all of this from the cabin window, standing tall in the flickering indoor light, as he took in the distant movement of SUVs on the horizon. His father, Harold Hale, sat at the dining table beside him, hands clasped tightly around a mug of coffee. The old man looked conflicted, proud of his son, terrified for him, and still shaken from everything Evelyn Cole had revealed the night before. "This is bigger than I thought," Harold murmured. Jack nodded, jaw tightening. "Corruption always runs deep. It grows in the dark." Ranger nudged Jack's leg with his nose, sensing the shift in emotion. Jack placed a hand on the dog's head, the simple gesture relaxing the tension in his shoulders. As the day turned into evening, word came through Jack's encrypted phone. The message was short, coded, and final. "Cole's enforcers have scattered. Remaining targets may attempt retaliation. Stay vigilant." Jack slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. His heartbeat slowed, becoming colder, more focused. He moved through the cabin, checking each sensor, tightening each lock, preparing every angle like the soldier he once was. By nightfall, a blizzard swept across Pine Valley. Wind howled around the cabin walls, clawing at the windows with icy fingers. The woods outside vanished into darkness. Snow whipped fiercely beneath the dim porch light, turning everything beyond 2 meters into a white void. Jack stood at the window, tall and unmoving, wrapped in his leather jacket and gray scarf. The storm outside matched the storm gathering inside him, quiet, intense, inevitable. Ranger stood pressed against his leg muscles, taut tail, low ears tracking every sound. The cabin was silent, until it wasn't. A single heavy crunch of footsteps broke the night. Slow, purposeful. Someone was walking through the snow. Jack's hand slipped instinctively toward the knife on the table. He held his breath. Then another crunch. Closer. A shadow moved past the frosted window, thick, distorted, unmistakably human. Ranger let out a low, vibrating growl. Jack's gray eyes hardened like steel. Someone was here, and they weren't here to talk. The night of reckoning had begun. A violent winter wind tore across Pine Valley, rattling the cabin walls as flakes of snow spiraled wildly through the darkness, erasing the world beyond a few feet. Inside the Hale cabin, the only light came from the dim glow of the fireplace, flickering across the wooden floor like restless spirits. Jack Hale stood with his back pressed against the window frame, tall and still wrapped in his dark brown leather jacket with the frayed edges and the gray scarf resting against his stubble-marked jaw. His gray eyes were razor-sharp, reflecting both the storm outside and the storm he had always carried within him. Ranger stood at his feet, muscles-coiled ears pointed toward the door. The German shepherd's breath came in slow, controlled rhythm, a disciplined soldier waiting for the signal. The storm hid everything, but it could not hide footsteps. A sudden crunch outside snapped the air inside the cabin. Jack lifted a hand slightly, a silent command he and Ranger had shared through countless battles. Ranger lowered his body toward the ground, ready. Jack mouthed one word, "Now." The back door exploded inward, splintering into pieces as 2 of Cole's remaining enforcers, both rugged men, dressed in black winter gear, charged inside. The first, a tall brute with a shaved head and a jagged scar running across his left cheek, moved with reckless aggression. His name was Derek Holt, known in the region for his violent temper and relentless loyalty to Cole's money. The second man, Mason Briggs, shorter but thickly built with a heavy beard and cold, hawk-like eyes, followed close behind. He was the calculating one, the type who rarely spoke but obeyed orders with unsettling precision. Derek lunged first, swinging a metal baton toward Jack's ribs, but Jack had already stepped to the side, years of training turning his movements into instinct. Derek's momentum carried him forward straight into Jack's elbow, which slammed into his jaw with a crack. Mason tried to rush around them, raising a knife, but Ranger moved like a bullet from a rifle. The dog launched himself at Mason's forearm teeth, clamping down with trained precision, forcing the weapon to drop. Mason shouted, stumbling backward, but Ranger held unyielding. Derek roared and charged Jack again, but Jack caught the metal baton mid-swing, yanked it free, and cracked it across Derek's knee, sending the man collapsing onto the floorboards. Years of self-imposed exile had thinned Jack's frame, but his strength, shaped by memory loss and discipline, had never left him. Mason finally tore himself free from Ranger's grip, blood staining the snow that spilled into the cabin. His eyes were wild now, fear overtaking cold precision. He reached for the fallen knife. Jack stepped forward, boot slamming down on Mason's wrist. "It's over," Jack growled, voice low, steady, ice cold. Before Mason could respond, a sharp beam of white light burst through the front windows. "FBI, don't move." The cabin filled with the sound of feet crashing through snow. The front door blasted open this time, not from enemies but from allies. Agent Mark Hanley entered first tactical jacket, dusted with snow expression, focused and unmoving. Behind him were 4 more federal agents, all armed, voices firm. Within seconds, Mason and Derek were restrained and hauled to their feet. Derek continued to curse, though the fear in his eyes betrayed him. Mason stayed silent, jaw clenched in defeat. Jack exhaled as the tension drained slowly from his muscles. Ranger stayed between him and the captured men until the last enforcer was escorted outside. When the agents cleared the cabin, Mark Hanley stepped closer. "Mr. Hale," he said at voice controlled but carrying a note of genuine respect, "looks like you saved us some trouble." Jack wiped a streak of blood from his cheek with the back of his hand. "They came to finish what Cole started." Hanley nodded. "And now it's finished." By morning, Pine Valley felt like a town waking from a nightmare. Word spread quickly. Cole arrested his network, exposed the sheriff, and Mayor removed, and the last of the enforcers captured. The town gathered for an emergency community meeting, held in the old gymnasium heaters, humming as snow continued to fall outside. At the front stood Anya Reed, the newly appointed interim manager. Anya was a woman in her early 50s with tightly curled dark hair, pulled back neatly almond brown skin, and sharp, thoughtful eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. She wore a burgundy winter coat and spoke with a calm, steady confidence that cut through the noise of fear and grief. She promised transparency, audits, rebuilding, healing. And then the doors opened. Travis Boone stepped inside. The entire room fell silent. Travis, once bulky with arrogance, now seemed deflated. His rugged face was pale, his shoulders slumped as though carrying the weight of every mistake he'd ever made. He approached the front, trembling slightly. "My name is Travis Boone," he said, voice hoarse, "and what I did, there's no excuse." He looked directly at Harold and Jack, sitting in the front row. "I hurt your family. I let myself become a weapon for a corrupt man. I was a coward." Travis swallowed hard, his eyes wet. "So I'm offering my company, Boone Construction, to repair every home, every fence, every building we damaged. Free. I'll use every dollar I've got. I'll earn forgiveness the only way I know how, with my hands." The gymnasium remained still. No applause, no jeers, just the raw honesty of a man trying to crawl out of darkness. Jack rose slowly. His tall frame, weathered face, and ice-gray eyes met Travis's trembling ones. "Your apology is the beginning," Jack said. "Your actions will tell the rest." Travis nodded, relief flooding his expression. Later that week, Ranger became a daily sight around town. Children approached him shyly at first, but Ranger met each small hand with a gentle nudge tail, giving a rare, soft wag. Someone painted a sign in front of the diner, "Ranger the Guardian of Pine Valley." On a quiet night long after the town had begun to breathe again, Jack and Harold sat on the porch of their cabin. A fire crackled inside, its warm glow spilling through the open doorway. Snow drifted lazily over the frozen lake. Harold placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Jack, for years you hid from the world, but today you saved an entire town. Jack stared out at the lake, the ice reflecting faint stars. For the first time in years, the weight inside his chest loosened. His gray eyes softened. Pine Valley was safe. And Jack Hale had finally stepped out of the darkness and back into the light. In the quiet moments after every storm, we're reminded that miracles don't always arrive with thunder. They often come through courage, kindness, and the unseen protection God places around us. Just as Pine Valley found its light again, may you find strength in your own daily battles and hope in the places you least expect. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment, subscribe, and help us spread messages of faith and resilience. May God bless you, guide your steps, and surround your home with His everlasting peace.